A 4-year-old homeless girl finds a millionaire being eaten alive by crows. But when he wakes up, someone appears behind her and does something that shocks everyone. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scorching afternoon sun beat down on the cracked asphalt of the vacant lot when Willow found him. The 4-year-old girl, so small and fragile she looked barely 2, wandered among the debris with faltering steps, her bare feet dodging shards of glass scattered across the ground. Her torn, dirt-stained clothes told a story of one who knew only the harshness of the streets of the sprawling metropolis of Chicago. The crows had discovered the motionless body before she did. 3 black birds surrounded the fallen man, pecking curiously at the expensive clothes that contrasted brutally with the filth of the abandoned place. The impeccably tailored suit, even rumpled and covered in dust, betrayed someone who belonged to a world completely different from that desolate scene. The little girl stopped a few yards away, watching the scene with those big, expressive eyes that had learned to decipher dangers from a very early age. Something inside her, an intuition developed by the need to survive, whispered that this man was not there by chance. He wasn't like the others who sometimes appeared in the lot, drunks or junkies looking for a place to sleep. This one was different. With a courage that defied her fragile appearance, she approached and began to clap her hands, scaring away the crows that reluctantly took flight. She knelt beside the stranger, immediately noticing the aristocratic features of the masculine face. Even unconscious and with pale skin, it was impossible not to recognize the handsomeness that made him look like a leading man from the soaps she sometimes managed to watch through store windows. His dark hair was disheveled, but maintained a cut that certainly cost more money than she saw in months of begging. The hands, even dirty, were manicured and wore a watch that shone discreetly on the wrist. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, concepts as distant from her reality as the stars in the sky. "Mister," she whispered, gently touching the stranger's shoulder. "Mister, wake up." Nothing. The man remained motionless, only the subtle movement of his chest indicating that he was still breathing. The girl looked around, checking that they were alone. The vacant lot stretched for hundreds of yards, surrounded by high walls and abandoned buildings. It was a place that even the police avoided, neutral territory where the marginalized of society sought refuge. She knew she should go. Her stepmother, who controlled her, had been clear about not getting involved with strangers, especially men. But something prevented her from abandoning this helpless person. Perhaps it was the same compassion that made her share her meager food with the stray dogs, or the distant memory of when someone had also been kind to her. With determination, she began to shake the man's shoulder more forcefully. "Please, wake up. This place isn't safe." It was then that his eyes opened, blue like the winter sky, confused and disoriented, trying to focus on the small figure leaning over him. The millionaire blinked several times, as if trying to distinguish reality from hallucination. The last thing he remembered was walking to an important meeting at his office. And then, nothing. "Are you okay, mister?" The child's voice was soft, but carried a maturity that did not match her age. He tried to sit up, feeling a violent dizziness that made him falter. The girl immediately extended her small hands to support him, a gesture so natural and careful that it touched him in an unexpected way. When was the last time someone had shown genuine concern for his well-being? Where am I?" His voice was hoarse, scratchy. "In the vacant lot near Main Street," she replied, helping him settle in better. "The crows were pecking at you. Have you been unconscious for a long time?" The question made him try to organize his fragmented thoughts. He vaguely remembered a strange feeling during breakfast, a growing nausea that he had attributed to business stress. Then, the memory became hazy, as if someone had erased entire pieces of his memories. "I don't know," he admitted, studying the girl's small, worried face. "How did you find me? I always come here." "It's a quiet place. She didn't mention that she came here to escape the constant surveillance of her stepmother, to have a few moments of peace away from the cruel demands of begging on the busy streets. The man observed her more closely, noticing the details that he had initially missed. The deteriorated clothes, the bare and injured feet, the extreme thinness that made her eyes seem even bigger in her small face. She was a street child, that was clear, but there was something special about her that intrigued him deeply. "What's your name?" he asked, feeling more stable. She hesitated for a moment, as if assessing whether it was safe to answer. "What's yours?" The question caught him off guard. He was used to being recognized instantly. His picture appeared regularly in the business section of the Chicago Tribune. He owned one of the largest construction companies in the city. His residential developments were changing the urban skyline. His equity in the stock market placed him among the wealthiest men in the country. "I'm in construction," he said simply, realizing that titles and fortunes meant nothing at that moment. "Construction," she repeated, testing the word. "Is that why you wear fancy clothes?" Before he could answer, a harsh voice cut through the air like a blade. "Where are you, you little brat?" The terror that instantly took over the child's features was visceral. She shrank back, her big eyes filling with genuine fear, as she looked in the direction from where the voice came. The millionaire felt something twist in his stomach as he witnessed such a radical transformation. The little girl, who moments before had shown courage and compassion, was now trembling like a cornered animal. "I have to go," she whispered, already getting up. "Wait!" He tried to hold her back, but she was already running towards the voice that continued to shout obscenities. Alone again in the vacant lot, the businessman watched the small figure disappear among the debris, carrying with her a mystery that he couldn't decipher. Something had happened to him there, something that his mind couldn't completely process. And that child, there was something about her that awakened feelings that he had buried along with his late wife. He got up unsteadily, checking his cell phone in his pocket. Several missed calls from his partner and assistant. It was already late afternoon, and he had lost entire hours without any explanation. 3 days had passed since the encounter in the vacant lot, but the millionaire couldn't get the image of the girl out of his head. Sitting in his office on the 40th floor of one of the most luxurious buildings in the city, with a panoramic view worth millions, he found himself looking out the window and wondering where she was at that moment. His construction company moved astronomical figures daily. His investments in real estate funds generated dividends that increased his net worth every hour, but none of that managed to occupy his mind completely. The memory of those big, scared eyes haunted him like a ghost. "Are you okay?" His partner's voice interrupted his thoughts. The man entered the room without knocking, as he always did, carrying a folder of documents and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm great," the millionaire lied, turning his chair to face him, "just thinking about the new projects." "About that?" The partner sat in the armchair in front of the desk, crossing his legs casually. "I need you to sign some urgent contracts. That development on the south side has been waiting for approval for days." The businessman picked up the papers, but his attention wandered again. There had been something strange in the last few days, small lapses of memory, moments of confusion that he attributed to work stress. Since losing his wife 2 years ago, he had immersed himself in business obsessively, working late into the night, so he wouldn't have to deal with the emptiness of his mansion. "Are you sure you're okay?" insisted the partner, with a concern that seemed excessive. "You seem distant." "I just need some fresh air." The millionaire got up, ignoring the papers. "I'm going for a walk." "But the contracts, they can wait until tomorrow." He left the office before his partner could protest, feeling an inexplicable urge to return to that vacant lot. On the way, he stopped at a diner and bought some sandwiches, not knowing exactly why he did it. The sun was setting when he arrived at the place, painting the sky in orange tones that contrasted with the desolation of the abandoned land. At first, he thought he had been foolish to come back there. The place was empty, only some cats looking for food among the debris. It was then that he saw her. The girl was sitting under a solitary tree that grew in the middle of the lot, drawing something in the dirt with a stick. Even from a distance, he could see that she was even thinner, her clothes more torn. A silent fury grew in his chest as he imagined what that child went through daily. He approached slowly, not wanting to scare her. When she looked up and recognized him, a shy smile lit up her small face. "The mister came back," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I came to see how you were." He sat on the ground next to her, ignoring the expensive suit that would certainly be ruined. "Are you hungry?" Her eyes lit up when she saw the sandwiches, but she hesitated. "My stepmother said I can't accept food from strangers." "Your stepmother worries about you." A shadow passed over the girl's face. "She worries about a lot of things." The evasive answer confirmed the millionaire's suspicions. He opened one of the sandwiches and began to eat, feigning disinterest. "It's delicious. It's a shame to waste it." The strategy worked. In a few minutes, she was devouring the food with a voracity that broke his heart. While she ate, he observed the drawings she had made in the dirt. They were birds, many birds flying towards the sun. "Do you like to draw?" "I like to imagine I can fly away," she replied without looking up. "Where would you like to fly?" "To a place where no one yells." The brutal sincerity of the answer hit him like a punch in the stomach. They were silent for a few minutes, him processing the revelation and her finishing her meal. When she finished, she wiped her hands on her clothes and looked at him with curiosity. "Why did the mister come here that day?" "This is no place for people like you." "What do you mean, people like me?" "Rich people. Clean. Who smell good." The observation made him smile for the first time in days. "I don't know why I came. I don't remember exactly what happened. You were very pale. You looked sick." Sick. The word echoed in his mind, awakening a concern that had been growing in recent days. The episodes of dizziness, the mental confusion, the lapses of memory, they weren't normal symptoms of stress. "Do you come here often?" he asked, changing the subject. "When I can escape." "My stepmother makes me stay on the street asking for money from morning until night. Here I can rest a little." "Is she your relative?" The girl made a confused expression, as if the question was too complicated. "She's taken care of me since she found me." "Found you where?" Before she could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed among the debris. The transformation in the child was instantaneous. The terror returned to her eyes, and she shrank back as if trying to become invisible. "There you are, you demon child!" The stepmother's voice cut through the air like a whip. "How many times have I told you not to disappear like that?" The woman who emerged from behind a pile of rubble was the opposite of everything he expected. Tall and robust, with disheveled hair and clothes that were once elegant but were now deteriorated. Her small, cunning eyes scanned the scene, stopping at the millionaire with obvious interest. "Who is this man?" she asked, but her tone had completely changed when she noticed his expensive clothes. "He was hurt. I helped him," murmured the girl, hiding behind the businessman. The stepmother studied the millionaire more closely, and he could see the exact moment when she recognized his financial worth. A calculating smile formed on her lips. Oh, how kind of the girl. She has a very good heart, always helping others. The change in behavior was grotesque. "I'm responsible for her. Thank you very much for any help you may have given." "She seems to be hungry," said the millionaire, keeping his tone neutral. "Hungry? No, she eats very well. Sometimes she gets anxious and can't eat properly." The lie came out with practiced ease. "We're a simple but happy family." The businessman looked at the girl, who kept her eyes fixed on the ground. Every line of her small body screamed fear and submission. "Perhaps I can help in some way," he suggested, testing the stepmother's reaction. The woman's eyes gleamed with poorly disguised greed. "Oh, you're very generous. Any help would be a blessing for our little family." "Then we'll meet here tomorrow at the same time." The stepmother nodded effusively, already planning how she could exploit that encounter. Meanwhile, the girl looked up quickly, and he saw in them a mixture of hope and terror that made him want to protect her immediately. When he left the vacant lot that night, the millionaire had already made a decision. No matter what it took, he would discover the whole truth about that child and the woman who controlled her. And more importantly, he would find out why his own memory was failing so alarmingly. Unbeknownst to him, at that very moment, his partner was ending a phone call in his office, confirming that the medicine was working perfectly and that he would soon own the entire company. The meeting scheduled for the next day weighed on the millionaire's mind like a stone. Throughout the morning, he tried to concentrate on business, but the numbers in the spreadsheets blurred before his eyes. The meeting seemed to proceed in slow motion, and a persistent nausea had accompanied him since he had had breakfast. "You need to sign these contracts today," insisted his partner, entering the room for the third time that morning. "The investors are getting impatient." "What investors?" The millionaire frowned, trying to remember some important meeting he might have forgotten. "The ones from the North Side project. We talked about it yesterday." The partner approached the desk, placing the papers directly in front of him. "You remember, don't you?" A vague memory floated in his mind, but slipped away before he could completely grasp it. In recent days, it was as if his memory was a leaky container, constantly losing important information. "Of course," he lied, picking up the pen. "I'm just a little distracted." While he was signing the documents, he didn't notice the satisfied smile that crossed his partner's face, nor did he notice how the man discreetly replaced his glass of water with another identical one before leaving the room. In the early afternoon, the businessman left the office early, claiming a headache. During the trip to the vacant lot, he stopped at a toy store and bought some items: dolls, crayons, a small teddy bear. He didn't know exactly why he did it, but something inside him insisted that that child deserved to have at least a few moments of joy. He arrived at the place before the agreed time and found the girl already waiting, sitting in the same place under the tree. This time, however, she was not alone. A boy of the same age was by her side, as thin as she was, with equally deteriorated clothes. "Hello," he greeted, approaching slowly. "Hi, handsome mister," replied the girl with a shy smile. "This is my friend. He also lives on the street." The boy watched him with suspicion, like a wild animal ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. "Is he the rich man you talked about?" "Yes. He gave me food yesterday." The millionaire sat on the ground and opened the bag with the toys. The eyes of the two children widened as if they were seeing a treasure. "For us?" asked the girl, hardly able to believe it. "For you?" What followed was one of the most touching moments the businessman had ever witnessed. The two children explored each toy with reverent care, as if they were sacred objects. The girl hugged the teddy bear against her chest and closed her eyes, whispering something that he couldn't hear. "I've never had a doll," she said, stroking the toy's hair. "And I've never had real cars," added the boy, making one of the toys roll in the dirt. While they played, the millionaire watched them attentively. There was something in the way they behaved, a forced maturity, a constant hypervigilance, small signs that their childhoods had been stolen too early. "Where do you sleep?" he asked gently. "It depends," replied the boy without looking up from the car. "Sometimes under the bridge, sometimes in the abandoned building nearby." "And you?" He turned to the girl. "My stepmother has a place." Her voice was lower, as if she feared being overheard. "But sometimes she locks me out when she's angry." "Why does she get angry?" The girl exchanged a quick look with her friend before answering. "When I don't get enough money, or when I ask too many questions." The millionaire felt anger rise in his chest, but kept his voice calm. "What kind of questions?" "About my real family, about how she found me." She hugged the teddy bear tighter. "She always says those things don't matter anymore." It was then that the boy said something that chilled the businessman's blood. "Yesterday, I saw a fancy man talking to the woman who takes care of her. He was asking about you." What do you mean? They were near the traffic light on Main Street. The man had expensive clothes like yours, but different. He asked if you had shown up around here, if she knew your name. The millionaire felt as if the ground had moved under his feet. Would you be able to recognize that man if you saw him again? I think so. He had a very shiny gold watch. Before he could ask more questions, the familiar voice of the stepmother echoed through the land. "Girl, where are you?" This time, she was not alone. A tall man accompanied her, wearing expensive clothes that the millionaire recognized immediately. His blood ran cold. It was his partner. "Ah, what a wonderful coincidence!" exclaimed the stepmother when she saw him, but there was something forced in her enthusiasm. "Sir, this is my friend. He was curious to meet the generous man who has been helping our little one." The partner approached with his usual calculating smile. "What a small world, isn't it? Imagine my surprise when I found out you were around here." "How did you find out?" The question came out more aggressively than the millionaire intended. "Your assistant mentioned that you had left early several times this week. I was worried." The partner gestured casually. "And then I found this nice lady who told me about your charity." The millionaire looked at the girl who had hidden behind the tree along with her friend. His instincts, dulled by days of mental confusion, finally began to awaken. There was something deeply wrong with that situation. "It's interesting how fate connects us to certain people," continued the partner, his eyes never leaving the businessman's face. "Sometimes we find exactly what we need in the most unexpected places." The stepmother laughed nervously. "It's true. The girl has this gift of appearing in people's lives at the right time." "Gift?" The millionaire got up, a terrible suspicion beginning to form in his mind. "Of helping, of course," said the stepmother quickly. "She always helps people." But the partner was watching the businessman's reaction with scientific interest, as if he were conducting an experiment. "You're looking a little pale, my friend. Maybe you should go home and rest." "I'm fine." "Are you sure? You've been having some episodes lately. Lapses of memory, confusion. Maybe it's time to see a doctor." The way he said that, with too much knowledge about symptoms that the millionaire had kept secret, set off all the alarms in his mind. He looked around, noticing for the first time how all of that seemed orchestrated. The isolated land, the presence of the stepmother, the child who had appeared exactly when he was most vulnerable. "I need to go," he said abruptly. Of course, but don't forget to take your vitamins." The partner smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile. "To stay healthy." As he walked quickly away from the land, the millionaire heard the stepmother whisper something to his partner. He couldn't make out the words, but the conspiratorial tone was unmistakable. Reaching the car, his hands were shaking so much that he had difficulty putting the key in the ignition. For the first time in weeks, his mind was completely clear, and the pieces of a terrible puzzle began to fit together. Someone was poisoning him systematically. Someone who had access to his food, his drink, his daily routine. Someone he trusted completely. And somehow, that innocent girl was being used as part of a plan far bigger and more sinister than he could ever have imagined. Looking in the rearview mirror, he saw the small figure of the child watching him leave, her arms hugging the teddy bear against her chest. At that moment, he knew he couldn't simply abandon her, no matter how dangerous the situation became, because he now understood that they were both victims of the same predator. That night, the millionaire couldn't sleep. Every shadow in his mansion seemed to hide a threat. Every noise made him jump out of bed. For the first time in 2 years, since the loss of his wife, he felt true fear, not of loneliness or pain, but of a conspiracy that extended to the most intimate aspects of his life. Sitting in his private study, surrounded by photographs of his multi-million-dollar developments and certificates of his investments in gold and cryptocurrencies, he tried to organize the fragments of memory that remained. When had he started to feel confused? When did the memory lapses become frequent? The answer hit him like a lightning bolt. 3 months ago, soon after his partner had suggested that he needed vitamins to cope with the intense pace of work, the man had even provided a special supplement, imported from Europe, and insisted that he take it daily. With trembling hands, the businessman opened the cabinet where he kept the bottle of vitamins. The transparent liquid seemed harmless, but now he saw sinister purposes in its crystalline clarity. How had he been so naive? He poured the contents of the bottle into the sink and watched it drain down the drain. If he was right in his suspicions, that represented months of systematic poisoning, a calculated attempt to destroy his mental capacity and eventually take control of his billion-dollar company. The phone rang, making him jump. It was almost midnight. "Hello? Are you okay?" His partner's voice sounded too worried, artificial. "You left very abruptly this afternoon." "I'm great," he lied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Good. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention, I scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning with those Japanese investors. You remember we talked about it, don't you?" He didn't remember any conversation, but now he understood the pattern. Meetings that he supposedly had agreed to, contracts that he apparently had approved, decisions that he didn't remember making. "Sure," he said, deciding to play the game. "What time?" 9 o'clock sharp, and don't forget to take your vitamins before you come. You've seemed a little scattered lately." The call ended, leaving the millionaire alone with the terrible confirmation of his suspicions. His own partner, the man he had trusted to build a construction empire, was systematically destroying his mind to steal everything he had built. But there was something even more disturbing about the situation. How did Willow fit into all this? Why was his partner interested in her? And why had that stepmother appeared exactly when he most needed a distraction? The next morning, the businessman pretended to take his vitamins in front of his partner, discreetly pouring the liquid into a potted plant. During the fictitious meeting, which as he suspected didn't exist, he carefully observed every move of the man he had considered his most trusted partner. "About that South Side project," said the partner casually, "we need to accelerate the capital transfers. The investors are anxious." "What transfers?" "The ones we discussed yesterday. You signed the papers, remember?" The partner showed documents with his signature, a signature that he didn't remember making. The businessman studied the papers, noting that they authorized massive transfers of funds to accounts he didn't recognize. His net worth was being systematically drained, and he had been too unconscious to notice. "I need to review these documents," he said, keeping his tone casual. Sure, but don't take too long. As you know, time is money." The partner smiled, but there was coldness in his eyes. "By the way, how was your visit to that needy family yesterday?" The question confirmed another suspicion. He was being watched. "Fine. The child seemed happy with the toys." "How generous of you. Although, between us, don't you think it's strange to find a little girl alone exactly when you were most vulnerable?" The millionaire kept a neutral expression, but internally his alarms went off. "Strange how?" "Just an interesting coincidence. A child appears in your life exactly when you're going through a difficult period, almost as if—" The partner left the sentence in the air, observing his reaction. "As if what?" Nothing. Just random thoughts." Later that day, ignoring his partner's protests about urgent appointments, the millionaire drove again to the vacant lot. This time, however, he arrived earlier and hid behind a pile of rubble, watching. What he saw made him nauseous. The stepmother was instructing Willow on how to behave, rehearsing gestures of vulnerability, practicing expressions of innocence. It was like watching a macabre play where a child was trained to be a magnet for compassion. "Remember," said the woman, holding the girl's thin arms with unnecessary force, "you need to look weaker, needier. Rich men like to feel like heroes." "But I'm really hungry," protested Willow. "That's good. Use that." Make him feel guilty for having so much when you have so little. And if he asks about my family again, the stepmother hesitated for a moment. Say you don't remember anything before I found you. And if he insists, cry. Men get desperate when children cry. The millionaire clenched his fists, feeling a fury he hadn't experienced in years. That child was being manipulated, used as a tool in a larger plan. But there was something in the way she hesitated, how she subtly resisted the instructions that suggested that she wasn't a willing participant. It was then that he saw something that completely changed his perspective. A man approached the stepmother, the same man that the boy had described the day before. He handed an envelope to the woman and whispered something in her ear. The stepmother's expression changed instantly, going from confident to terrified. "No, please," he could hear her whisper. "I'm doing everything you asked me to do." "You are, but not fast enough," replied the man. "Our boss is getting impatient. He wants concrete results within a week." "A week? But that's impossible. He's starting to suspect." "Then get more creative. Use the girl more effectively. Make him fall in love with the idea of saving her. Men like him have a hero complex, especially after losing their wife." The mention of his late wife made the millionaire's blood boil. They had studied his life, his vulnerabilities, planned every aspect of this manipulation carefully. And if he finds out? He won't find out. He's too drugged to think clearly. The man laughed cruelly. But if he does find out, well, accidents happen, and orphans disappear from the streets every day. The veiled threat against the girl was the last straw. The businessman came out of his hiding place, confronting the two adults. "What kind of accident?" he asked, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. The stepmother paled, but the man just smiled. "Ah, the philanthropic millionaire. Glad you showed up. Saves time." "Time for what?" "To explain how things are going to work from now on." The man gestured, and two other men emerged from behind the rubble. The millionaire realized that he had fallen into a trap, but it was too late to retreat. "You know, you've been more troublesome than we expected," continued the man. "The drugs should have made you more cooperative. But it seems you've developed some resistance. Drugs, the special vitamins that your dear partner has been providing. Nothing lethal, just something to keep your mind cloudy while he reorganizes your assets." The man studied his nails casually. "Unfortunately, your sudden mental clarity has created some complications." Willow, who had watched the whole conversation with wide eyes of terror, suddenly broke the silence. "I know where you keep the important papers." Everyone turned to her, surprised by the interruption. "What are you talking about, girl?" growled the man. "I saw you hiding things in the abandoned building, papers with numbers, photographs." Her voice was small, but firm. "If you hurt him, I'll tell everyone where they are." What followed was a moment of tense silence, where the millionaire realized that that 4-year-old child, appearing only 2 due to malnutrition, had just become the most dangerous piece on the board of a deadly game. The silence that followed the girl's statement was broken by the sound of rough laughter from the men. The leader of the group shook his head, amused by the child's audacity. "Smart little thing," he said, crouching down to her height. "But you don't understand who you're messing with." The girl recoiled instinctively, but kept her eyes fixed on the man. "Yes, I do. You're bad people who hurt others to take their money. And you're just a dirty kid that no one would miss." The coldness in the man's voice made the millionaire step forward, placing himself protectively between them. "Leave her alone," ordered the businessman. "Your issues are with me. Our issues are with anyone who gets in the way of our plans." The man stood up, signaling to the others. "And this girl has just become a very big problem." It was then that something unexpected happened. The stepmother, who until then had remained silent and terrified, suddenly shouted, "Run!" Before anyone could react, she pushed the girl towards the millionaire and threw herself against one of the men, knocking him down. chaos ensued instantly. The businessman picked up the child and ran, his feet slipping on the rubble, while screams and sounds of fighting echoed behind them. The girl clung to his neck, trembling violently. "Is the mean lady going to be okay?" she whispered in his ear. "I don't know," he replied honestly, desperately looking for a way out of the vacant lot. They managed to reach the car and leave before their pursuers reached them. Throughout the trip, the girl remained silent, huddled in the passenger seat, occasionally looking in the rearview mirror as if expecting to see someone following them. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "To a safe place." The millionaire drove without a specific destination, trying to process everything that had happened. "Do you really know where they keep important documents?" She nodded. "In the building where I sometimes sleep with my friend. There's a hidden basement. I saw them putting boxes there several times. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I was afraid." Her voice was even smaller. "And because my stepmother said people like me shouldn't get involved in the business of important people." The businessman felt a pang of guilt. That child had witnessed crimes, had crucial information, but was so conditioned to remain invisible that she didn't even consider that her testimony could be valuable. He drove to a discreet hotel on the outskirts of the city, away from the places where they could be easily found. While checking in, the girl remained glued to his leg, her big eyes constantly scanning the environment for threats. In the room, she sat on the edge of the giant bed, looking even smaller in contrast to the luxurious furniture. It was the first time the millionaire had seen her in a clean, well-lit environment, and what he observed shocked him deeply. In addition to the obvious malnutrition, there were marks on her arms, small scars that seemed intentional. Her feet were covered in old and new wounds. Her hair, when washed, revealed a natural brown color that had been masked by dirt. "When was the last time you ate a real meal?" he asked, calling room service. "I don't remember." She played nervously with the hem of her torn t-shirt. "My stepmother sometimes gave me leftovers, but she said thin girls earned more money on the street." The revelation was like a punch in the stomach. "How long have you lived with her?" "Since forever, I think. She said she found me when I was a baby, that nobody wanted me." "And you believe that?" The girl hesitated, as if the question was too complicated. "Sometimes I dream about a woman who sang to me. But my stepmother says they're just silly dreams." Room service arrived, and the millionaire watched the child devour the food with a voracity that was both touching and depressing. Between bites, she recounted fragments of her life on the streets. "My friend said he'd seen the fancy man other times before. He always showed up when my stepmother was nervous, like she'd done something wrong." "What kind of wrong thing?" "I don't know. But once I heard her crying on the phone, saying she couldn't do what they wanted because you were too smart." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in the businessman's mind. His approach with the child hadn't been accidental. It had been orchestrated from the beginning, but something had gone wrong with the original plan. "Do you remember the day you found me in the vacant lot? How did you know I was there?" "My stepmother told me to go there. She said I might find someone who could give me money." The girl stopped eating, a confused expression crossing her face. "But when I saw you lying there with the crows, I forgot everything she had said. I just wanted to help you." "Why?" "Because you looked sad even when you were sleeping, like me." The simplicity of the answer touched something deep in the millionaire's heart. That child had disobeyed direct orders simply out of compassion, an act of pure kindness amid so much manipulation and evil. That night, while the girl slept soundly in the hotel bed, probably the first night of truly safe sleep in years, the businessman stayed awake on the sofa, making discreet calls. First, he contacted a private investigator he trusted, someone who had worked for him on corporate investigations in the past. Then he called his personal lawyer, explaining that he needed urgent legal protection. "Are you sure you don't want to involve the police?" asked the lawyer. "Not yet. First, I need to understand the extent of the conspiracy. If my own partner is involved, how many other people in my company might be compromised? And the child? The millionaire looked at the small, sleeping figure, her face finally relaxed and peaceful. She stays with me. Whatever happens, I won't let her go back to that life. That could complicate things legally. Then complicate them. I have enough money to deal with legal complications. What I can't do is abandon an innocent child who has already suffered too much. The next morning, the girl woke up disoriented, taking a few seconds to remember where she was. When she saw the millionaire sitting in the nearby armchair, she smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed her face. "I thought I had dreamed it all," she said, stretching on the soft bed. "It wasn't a dream, and today we're going to do something important." "What?" "We're going to the building where you saw them hide the documents, but this time we're not going alone." The detective that the millionaire had hired was an experienced man, specialized in corporate espionage. Along with him, he brought a surveillance technician and a social worker, someone trained to deal with children in traumatic situations. "She's too young for this," protested the social worker when she heard the plan. "She's the only one who knows where to look," replied the businessman, "and I promise I won't expose her to any danger." The girl listened to the conversation with a seriousness beyond her years. "I want to help," she said finally. "The bad people hurt the stepmother because of me. I need to do something." It was then that she revealed something that completely changed the course of the investigation. "Yesterday, before all that happened, I heard the bad man talking on the phone. He said if they didn't get the money from the handsome mister soon, they would have to use Plan B, and Plan B involved other children. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone understood that they were dealing with something much bigger than a simple business fraud. "How many other children?" asked the detective gently. "I don't know, but he said a number, 10, 15, and he talked about new merchandise arriving next week." The millionaire felt like the world had stopped spinning. They weren't just facing a conspiracy to steal his fortune. They were facing a child trafficking ring that used legitimate companies as a front. And that brave 4-year-old girl, who seemed to be only 2 due to suffering, was the key to dismantling everything. The discovery about the child trafficking ring completely transformed the nature of the investigation. What had started as a suspicion of business fraud now revealed itself as something much darker and more urgent. The millionaire knew that every lost hour could mean more lives in danger. "We need to act fast," said the detective, studying the notes he had made during the conversation with the girl. "If there really is new merchandise arriving next week, we have a few days to intervene." The social worker, an experienced woman in cases of child abuse, knelt down to the girl's height. "Honey, do you remember anything else that can help us? Any detail, no matter how small?" The child frowned, concentrating intensely. "The bad man talked about a place called the warehouse. He said it was getting full and they needed a bigger space." "Warehouse of what?" asked the millionaire, although he already knew the terrible answer. "Of children like me." Her voice was so small that it could barely be heard. "He said some were for special clients and others for work." The silence that followed was filled with horror. All the adults present understood the sinister implications of those innocent words. "There's something else," continued the girl, playing nervously with the hem of her new t-shirt. "My stepmother isn't really bad. She cried sometimes when she thought I was sleeping, and once she said on the phone that she wanted to stop, but that they had something on her." "Something like what?" asked the social worker. "I don't know, but she got very scared when she talked about it." The detective exchanged meaningful glances with the millionaire. "Blackmail. It's likely that she's also a victim, forced to cooperate by some kind of coercion." During the rest of the day, the team worked in shifts to watch the abandoned building that the girl had indicated. What they discovered confirmed their worst fears. There was constant movement of discreet vehicles, men entering and leaving carrying boxes, and occasionally small hooded figures that were clearly children. "It's bigger than we imagined," reported the detective after the first reconnaissance mission. "There are at least 3 floors being used, a sophisticated security system, and we estimate that there are between 15 and 20 people operating on the site." The millionaire felt the responsibility weighing on his shoulders like a mountain. His fortune accumulated in decades of hard work, his investments in stocks and cryptocurrencies, all his net worth. None of that seemed important in the face of the suffering of those innocent children. "What's the plan?" he asked. "First, we need more concrete evidence. Testimony from a 4-year-old child won't be enough in court." The detective opened a laptop, showing blueprints of the building. "We need to get in there, photograph documents, record conversations." "It's too dangerous," protested the social worker. "If they find out—" "If we do nothing, more children will suffer," interrupted the millionaire. "I have resources, I have influence. I can hire the best security team that money can buy." It was then that the girl, who had been quietly listening to the adults' conversation, spoke up. "I can get in there." Everyone turned to her, surprised. "Absolutely not," said the millionaire immediately. "But I know the building," she insisted, with a surprising determination for her age. "I know where the boxes are. I know which staircase doesn't make noise. I know where the bad men don't go." "It's too dangerous, sweetie," said the social worker gently. "More dangerous than living on the street. More dangerous than being beaten by my stepmother every day." The girl's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I want to help the other children. Nobody helped me when I needed it." The statement touched everyone present deeply. That child, who had suffered so much in her few years of life, was willing to risk herself to save others in the same situation. "There's a way to do this safely," said the detective slowly. "We can equip her with tracking and audio devices. She goes in, locates the documents, and comes out. We stay on standby outside." "I don't like this," murmured the millionaire. "Neither do I," admitted the detective, "but it may be our only chance to get solid evidence before they move the operation to another location." That night, while the girl slept in the hotel room, the millionaire received a call that changed everything once again. "Hello? You have something that belongs to us." The voice was cold, mechanized by an electronic modifier. "I don't know what you're talking about." The girl. She saw things she shouldn't have seen. "We want her back." A sinister laugh echoed through the phone. "You think your money can protect her from everything? That your investments in gold and euros can buy absolute security? You're very wrong. What do you want? Simple. You stop asking questions, forget everything you saw, and hand over the girl. In exchange, your businesses continue to thrive, and you continue to breathe. And if I refuse, then you'll find out that accidents can happen to anyone, even millionaires who think they're untouchable." The call ended, leaving the businessman alone, with the certainty that time was running out quickly. The next morning, he woke up with the feeling that he was being watched. Looking out the hotel window, he saw suspicious vehicles parked on the street. When he went down for breakfast, he noticed men in suits reading newspapers at nearby tables, but their eyes were fixed on him and the girl. "They found us," he whispered to the detective when he arrived. "It was expected, but that also means we're on the right track." The detective discreetly observed the watchers. "They're nervous, making mistakes. That's when they become more dangerous, but also more vulnerable." Willow, sensing the tension of the adults, approached the millionaire. "Are the bad men here?" "Some of them, yes." "Then we need to be smarter than them." She spoke with a maturity that shouldn't exist in a child her age. "When are we going to the building?" "Tonight," replied the detective. "But first, we're getting out of here. They know where we are, so we need a new, safe location." What followed was a complex, evasive maneuver that lasted for hours. Using multiple vehicles, alternate routes and transfer points, they managed to reach a new location, a safe house in the suburbs that the detective had prepared for emergencies. During the trip, Willow observed everything with attentive eyes, asking questions about strategy and security that surprised the adults. It was as if her young mind was absorbing and processing information at accelerated speed. "Aren't you afraid?" asked the millionaire as she examined the surveillance equipment she would use on the mission. "I'm very afraid," she admitted, "but I've learned that sometimes we have to do things that scare us to protect the people we love." "And who do you love?" "You, and my friend who's still on the streets, and all the children who are suffering like I suffered." She looked at him with those big, serious eyes. "Sometimes, when you have nothing, the only thing you can give is your courage." At that moment, the millionaire understood that he was facing an extraordinary child, someone who had been forged by suffering but not broken by it, someone who could grow up to change the world, if she had the chance, and he would do anything to ensure that she had that chance. As the final preparations for the night mission were finalized, none of them knew that an even more shocking revelation awaited them in the dark basement of that abandoned building. A discovery that would connect past and present in ways they could never have imagined. Night fell over the city like a black cloak, bringing with it a tension that could be felt in the air. In the safe house, the team was making the final preparations for the mission that could save dozens of children or result in tragedy for everyone involved. Willow was sitting in a chair while the surveillance technician adjusted the small devices she would carry. A tiny transmitter was sewn into the collar of her t-shirt, almost invisible even to those who knew it was there. A GPS tracker was placed on the sole of her new sneakers, the first proper pair of shoes she had worn in her life. "Remember," said the detective, kneeling in front of her, "you go in, find the boxes with documents, take some pictures with this." He showed a tiny camera. "And get out immediately. Don't try to be a hero. Your safety is more important than any evidence." Willow nodded gravely. "And if I find other children inside? You note where they are and tell us later. Don't try to free them alone. That could put you all in even greater danger." The millionaire watched the preparations with a heavy heart. In recent days, that small and fragile child had become the most important thing in his life. The idea of sending her into danger went against all his protective instincts. "Maybe we should find another way," he said for the 10th time. "There is no other way," replied Willow, with a determination that contrasted drastically with her vulnerable appearance. "Those bad men will continue hurting children if we don't stop them, and I'm the only one who can get in there without raising suspicion." At 11 o'clock at night, the team positioned themselves at strategic points around the abandoned building. The millionaire stayed in the command vehicle, from where he could monitor both the audio and GPS of the girl. His hands trembled as he checked the equipment for the 3rd time. "Audio test," he whispered into the microphone. "I hear you clearly," came the small, brave response. "I'm ready. Remember, at the slightest sign of danger, you run out. Don't worry about us." "Okay. I love you, Daddy." The word "Daddy" hit the millionaire like a lightning bolt. In all the days they had spent together, she had never used that term. She had chosen that moment, when she was about to risk herself for other children, to finally call him by the name he secretly longed to hear. "I love you too, daughter," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. Willow approached the building with silent steps, using all the survival skills she had developed during years of living on the streets. She knew every shadow, every sound that indicated danger, every way to move without being detected. The entrance she used was a broken window on the ground floor, hidden behind overgrown bushes. It was too small for an adult, but perfect for a child her size. She sneaked through the opening like a living shadow. "I'm in," she whispered into the microphone. The interior of the building was even more sinister in the darkness. Long corridors stretched in various directions, punctuated by closed doors from which muffled sounds occasionally came. The smell of the place was a mixture of mold, fear, and something else, something that she couldn't identify, but that made her stomach turn. Following her memories of the time she had hidden there, she navigated the corridors until she reached the staircase that led to the basement. Each step was carefully tested before receiving her weight, avoiding those that she knew made noise. Reaching the basement, she reported in an almost inaudible whisper. What she found down there surpassed her worst nightmares. The basement had been converted into a kind of operations center. There were tables covered with documents, computers, piles of photographs, and in the back, an area with makeshift bunk beds where several children slept. Her heart tightened as she saw the small figures huddled under thin blankets. Some seemed to be her age, others were even smaller. All had the same expression of resigned terror that she knew so well. "I found the other children," she whispered into the microphone, trying to keep her voice steady. "There are many there." "Concentrate on the documents first," came the urgent response from the detective. "We need evidence." Reluctantly, she headed for the tables covered in papers. Using the small flashlight she had received, she began to photograph everything she could. Financial documents, lists of names, photographs of children with numbers written on the back, spreadsheets with values in dollars and euros. It was then that she saw something that made her freeze in horror. In one of the photographs, she recognized the face of her friend, the boy who had spent so many nights with her under the bridge, sharing food and stories. On the back of the photo was written, "Special merchandise, premium customer, delivery confirmed." "They took my friend," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Stay focused," came the firm response from the millionaire. "Photograph everything you can and get out of there." She continued taking pictures, but her hands were now trembling visibly. In a special folder, she found documents that made her understand the true extent of the operation. It wasn't just child trafficking, it was an international network that laundered money through legitimate companies, including the Millionaires construction company. "They used your company to launder money," she whispered into the microphone. "There are fake contracts, projects that never existed." It was then that she heard footsteps upstairs, heavy, determined, approaching the basement stairs. "Someone is coming," she warned in a panic. "Get out of there now," ordered the detective. But it was too late. A male voice echoed down the stairs. "I know you're down there, little girl. Why don't you make things easier for all of us?" The girl hid behind a pile of boxes, her heart beating so loudly that she was sure everyone could hear it. The photographs she had taken were recorded on the small camera hidden in her clothing. But that wouldn't matter if she was captured. "We know you're not alone," continued the voice, now closer. "Your rich friends are out there, aren't they, thinking they can stop us?" The footsteps descended the steps slowly, one at a time, as if the man was savoring the fear he caused. The girl closed her eyes and tried to become even smaller, a skill she had perfected during years of hiding from danger. "You know what happens to curious children who meddle where they shouldn't?" The voice was now very close. "They join the other merchandise, and smart girls like you are highly valued by our special clients." Outside, the millionaire heard everything through the audio, his anguish growing with each second. "We need to get in there," he said to the detective. "If we do that now, we could put all the children in danger. They could use them as human shields." "I can't stand here listening to this." It was then that something unexpected happened. One of the children in the basement woke up and, seeing the girl hidden, deliberately knocked a metal object from the other side of the room. The noise echoed loudly, causing the man to turn in the wrong direction. "Damn kids," he muttered, walking towards the noise. The girl took advantage of the distraction to move silently towards the stairs. She climbed the steps like a shadow, every muscle in her small body tense with adrenaline. "I'm getting out," she whispered into the microphone. But when she reached the ground floor, she discovered that more men had arrived. Voices echoed through the corridors, looking for her. The window through which she had entered was now blocked by 2 guards. "I can't get out the same way," she reported, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Look for another exit," instructed the detective. "There's a window on the 2nd floor, west side. We can get to you there." The girl began to climb the stairs towards the 2nd floor, but with each step she took, More voices joined the search. It was as if the entire building had awakened to hunt her. It was then that she heard something that made her stop completely. The muffled crying of a very young child coming from a nearby room. It was a sound she knew well, the cry of someone who had given up waiting for help. Against all instructions, against all instincts of self-preservation, she headed for that door. Outside, the millionaire felt his world crumble when he heard her voice whisper into the microphone. "There's a baby here. I can't leave him alone." The sound of the baby's crying echoed in the girl's heart like a cry for help that she couldn't ignore. Against all safety rules, against all instructions she had received, she carefully opened the door from which the sound came. What she found in the dimly lit room made her stifle a scream of horror. There were 5 young children, the oldest appearing to be no more than 3 years old, all chained by their ankles to improvised metal structures. The crying baby was no more than a year old, his clothes dirty and his face red from crying so much. "My God," she whispered into the microphone, her words loaded with deep sorrow. They chained babies. Outside, the millionaire clenched his fists so tightly that his nails left marks on the palm of his hands. All his money, all his influence, all his investments in valuable assets, none of that was enough to protect those innocents at that moment. "Get out of there now," ordered the detective urgently. "The voices are getting closer." "I can't leave them," replied the girl, her voice firm despite the fear. "They're just babies." She approached the nearest child, a little girl of about 2 years old, who looked at her with huge, frightened eyes. "Hi, sweetie," she whispered gently. "I'm going to get you out of here." But the chains were strong, fastened with padlocks that she couldn't open. Her small hands tried to force the metal, but it was useless. Despair began to take over her. "I can't release the chains," she reported, her voice beginning to tremble. "I need help." "Get out of there and bring the exact location," insisted the detective. "We'll come back with a bigger team. What if they move the children? What if they hurt them because of me?" It was then that she heard heavy footsteps in the hallway, approaching rapidly the room where she was. There was no time to continue trying to release the chains, but she couldn't simply abandon those babies either. In a moment of desperate inspiration, she remembered something she had learned on the streets. When you can't solve a problem, sometimes it's possible to create a bigger distraction. She quickly left the baby's room and ran to the other side of the corridor, where she had seen an open window. She picked up a loose brick from the sill and threw it forcefully against a window on the ground floor. The sound of shattering glass echoed throughout the building. "She's on the ground floor," shouted a male voice. "Surround all the exits." The sound of heavy footsteps headed immediately down, leaving the second floor temporarily deserted. The girl took advantage of the confusion to return to the baby's room. "Listen," she whispered to the little children. "Good people are going to come get you very soon. You just need to wait a little longer." The crying baby calmed down at the sound of her gentle voice. She hummed softly, a song that she vaguely remembered from her own childhood, a melody that brought comfort even amid the horror. "I'm recording the exact location of the children," she whispered into the microphone. "Second room to the right on the second floor. 5 children, the youngest is a baby." "Received. Now get out of there immediately." The girl headed for the window on the west side as instructed. But when she arrived there, she discovered that the fall was too high for her to descend alone. It was at least 12 feet to the ground, a distance that could be fatal for someone her size. "The window is too high," she reported, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "There's a fire escape to the right of the window," instructed the detective. "Can you reach it?" She leaned out of the window, stretching her arm as far as she could. The fire escape was only inches from her hand, but those inches seemed like an abyss. It was then that she heard voices returning to the second floor. They had discovered that the distraction of the broken glass was false. "Search room by room," ordered a rough voice. "She has to be here somewhere." With no more options, the girl made a desperate decision. She went completely out of the window, holding on only to the sill with her small hands, and tried to swing herself to reach the fire escape. In the first movement, her fingers slipped. For a fraction of a second that seemed like an eternity, she fell freely through the night air. Her last thought before hitting the ground was that she had failed to save the babies, failed to get the evidence, failed the man who had become her father. But fate, which had been so cruel to her throughout her life, chose that moment for a small act of mercy. Her fall was cushioned by a pile of old mattresses that had been discarded in the courtyard of the building. The impact was strong enough to take her breath away and leave her stunned, but not to hurt her seriously. "I'm on the ground," she whispered weakly into the microphone. "I'm okay." The response came immediately, loaded with relief and urgency. "Run to the meeting point. Now." She got up unsteadily and began to run in the indicated direction, her legs still trembling from the shock of the fall. Behind her, shouts echoed from the building. They had discovered that she had escaped. She got away. Search the surroundings. She couldn't have gone far. The millionaire saw her emerge from the shadows like a small ghost, dirty and scared, but alive. He jumped out of the vehicle and picked her up in his arms, squeezing her against his chest with a force that spoke of all the fear he had felt. "Never again," he whispered in her ear. "Never again will I let you risk yourself like that." "I got the pictures," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder, "and I know where the babies are. But we need to save them tonight. We can't wait." The detective approached, his expression grave. "The pictures you took are enough evidence for an official operation. I can contact the appropriate authorities." "How long will that take?" asked the millionaire. "A few hours to organize a coordinated operation, maybe even tomorrow morning." "They'll move the children before that," protested Willow. "I heard them say they always change places when there are problems." It was then that the millionaire made a decision that would change everything. He took out his phone and made a call to a number he hadn't dialed in years. "Who are you calling?" asked the detective. "Someone who owes me a few favors," replied the businessman, "and who has the resources needed to act immediately." The call was answered on the second ring. "I didn't expect to hear your voice again," said a male voice on the other end of the line. "I need a favor, Commander." "A big favor? After what you did for my family, anything." The millionaire quickly explained the situation. The man on the other end of the line was a former military officer who had founded a private security company after leaving the army. Years ago, when his daughter had been kidnapped, the businessman had used all his wealth and influence to help find her. "How long do you need to assemble a team?" asked the millionaire. "To rescue children?" 30 minutes. While they waited for the reinforcements to arrive, Willow insisted on drawing a detailed map of the interior of the building, marking each important location. Her small hands traced precise lines, showing escape routes, guard positions, and most importantly, the exact location of the chained babies. "There's one thing I need to tell you," she said to the millionaire while drawing. "When I was down there, I saw a folder with pictures. One of them was of my friend, that boy you met in the vacant lot." The businessman's heart squeezed. "What happened to him?" The picture had a stamp. "Delivered. He was sold to someone." Tears began to stream down her face. "It's my fault. If I hadn't run away with you, maybe he would still be safe." "It's not your fault," said the millionaire firmly, hugging her again. "None of this is your fault. You're just a child who should be playing and laughing, not fighting to survive." It was then that the security company vehicles arrived, 12 trained men, equipped with military technology, ready for an operation that would normally take hours of planning. "The children are the absolute priority," instructed the commander to his team. "Any evidence is secondary. Any adult who resists will be neutralized, but without excessive violence." Before the operation began, Willow approached the millionaire one last time. "If anything happens to me," she began, "nothing will happen. But if it does, I want you to know that you gave me the most important thing I've ever had in my life. What was that? The feeling of having a family. And with those words, the most important rescue operation of their lives began. The rescue operation began at 2 o'clock in the morning with the precision of a Swiss watch. 12 trained men moved like shadows around the abandoned building, each knowing exactly their role in the mission. The Millionaire and Willow stayed in the command vehicle, watching through multiple screens the video feeds transmitted by the soldiers' cameras. "Team Alpha in position," came the calm voice of the commander through the radio. "We confirm 6 hostiles on the ground floor, 2 on the second floor." "And the children?" asked Willow, leaning closer to the screen. "Team Bravo confirmed location of the smaller targets. Second room to the right, second floor, exactly as you indicated." The first obstacle appeared when the team discovered that the security system of the building was more sophisticated than they expected. Surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and silent alarms protected each entrance. "They invested heavily in technology," murmured the detective. "This confirms that the operation is bigger than we thought." "How long to neutralize the system?" asked the Millionaire. 2 minutes, replied the team's electronics specialist. "But they'll know we're here as soon as I start. Do it. The surprise will last long enough." What followed were the 2 longest minutes of the businessman's life. On the screens he could see the officers positioning themselves, preparing for a coordinated raid that would either save innocent lives or end in tragedy. Willow held his hand tightly, her eyes glued to the grainy images. "Promise you'll save them all?" "I promise we'll try." "System neutralized," crackled the confirmation over the radio. "Initiating operation in 3, 2, 1. The teams breached simultaneously from 4 different points of the building. The Mister led the main group through the ground floor, while a smaller team ascended directly to the second floor where the infants were held. The resistance was immediate and fierce. Screams echoed through the building as the criminals realized they were under attack. But the Mister's men were seasoned professionals, moving with lethal efficiency through the dim corridors. "First floor secure," a voice reported. 3 hostiles neutralized, 2 fleeing. "Team Bravo reaching the location of the little targets," came another update. On the command vehicle's screens, the Mister and Willow saw the exact moment the nursery door was breached. What the cameras revealed made the Mister clench his fists in rage. The 5 toddlers were exactly as Willow had described, chained and terrified. "Good God," the commander whispered, momentarily losing his professional composure. "What kind of monsters do this to babies?" "Focus on the mission," the Mister ordered, though his own voice trembled with fury. "Get those kids out of there." The soldiers worked swiftly to sever the chains, using specialized tools they had brought. The infants wailed in fear, not understanding if these strange men were saviors or new tormentors. "We need someone the kids won't be afraid of," one of the soldiers said. "They're petrified." Willow looked at the Mister. "I can help. They'll trust me." "Absolutely not. You've risked enough already." "But they're scared. I can calm them down." Before he could protest further, the commander's voice cut through the argument. "We have a bigger problem. We've just discovered 2 more subterranean floors, and there's movement down there." The revelation hit everyone like a jolt. The operation they thought was nearly complete was, in fact, just beginning. "How many kids could be down there?" asked the detective. "Impossible to know," the commander replied. "But from the sounds we're picking up, it's a lot." The Mister made a decision that would define the rest of the night. "Send half the team into the sub-levels. I'm going to the second floor, personally, to help with the babies." "Sir, that's not safe." "My daughter was right. The children need to see a friendly face." He turned to Willow. "You stay here, in the vehicle. That's non-negotiable." "But no buts. You've done your part. Now it's my turn." Exiting the command vehicle for the first time that night, the Mister headed toward the building where professional soldiers were fighting to save innocent lives. His years of comfortable living, shielded by his wealth and investments, had not prepared him for this brutal reality. When he reached the second-floor room, he encountered a scene that would forever sear itself into his memory. The 5 babies had been freed from their chains, but they were in a state of severe shock. The youngest, no more than a year old, was crying inconsolably. The others huddled in the corners of the room, trembling with terror. "They won't let anyone near them," one of the soldiers explained. "Any sudden movement and they become even more distraught." The mister knelt on the floor, maintaining a respectful distance from the children. His experience with Willow in recent days had taught him that patience was essential when dealing with traumatized children. "Hey, little ones," he said in the gentlest voice he could muster. "I'm here to take you to a safe place." Gradually he began to hum the same tune he'd heard Willow singing to soothe the baby earlier. He didn't know where he knew the melody from, but something about it felt universal, a primal comfort that resonated with hearts regardless of age. Slowly, very slowly, the children began to calm down. The baby stopped crying. A little girl, about 2 years old, cautiously approached, her large eyes studying the mister's face. "You good?" she asked in a small, broken voice. "I am," he replied, feeling tears prick at his own eyes, "and I'm going to make sure you're all safe." Meanwhile, in the sublevels, Team Alpha had made an even more shocking discovery. There weren't just children down there. There was a full-fledged operation involving document forgery, fraudulent accounting, and money laundering. "Commander," came the urgent voice of one of the soldiers over the radio, "you need to see this. There are documents here showing transactions of millions of dollars. This operation is international. Focus on the children first," the commander ordered. "We can collect the documents later." But what they found on the lowest level of the sublevels was the true heart of the operation. A large room where about 20 children, all between the ages of 3 and 10, were being held in deplorable conditions. Unlike the chained infants, these children had already been processed. They wore uniform clothes, had numbers tattooed on their wrists, and their eyes reflected a resignation that was even more disturbing than the terror. "My God," whispered one of the more seasoned soldiers. "It's like a children's concentration camp." The operation to extract the children from the sublevels was technically more complex. Many were sick, some could barely walk, others were so traumatized that they did not respond to external stimuli. Medics were called in as an emergency. Ambulances lined the street like a macabre procession. Back in the command vehicle, Willow watched everything through the screens, tears streaming silently down her face. "I was one of the lucky ones," she whispered to the detective. "I only got hit by my stepmother. These children have been through much worse, and now they are free thanks to your courage," he replied. "No," she shook her head. "They are free because Daddy has a good heart and enough money to make a difference." At 5 in the morning, as the sun began to rise over the city, the operation had finally been completed. 32 children had been rescued, 12 adults had been apprehended, and hundreds of compromising documents had been seized. But the victory had a bitter taste when the mister thought of all the other children they had not been able to save. Those who had already been delivered, like her street friend. "It's just the beginning," said the commander, watching the ambulances leave with the rescued children. "With the evidence we found, we will be able to track the entire network." The mister nodded, but his attention was focused on a specific child. The girl who had made all this possible was sleeping in the back seat of the vehicle, exhausted by the tension of the night. In her sleep, she smiled, perhaps dreaming of all the children who were now safe. Looking at her, the mister knew that his life had changed forever, not only because he had uncovered a conspiracy that sought to destroy him, but because he had found a greater purpose for all his wealth, to protect the most vulnerable. But first, there was an urgent personal matter to resolve. Somewhere in the city, his treacherous partner was still free, still controlling aspects of his company, still posing a threat. And the mister was determined to make him accountable for everything he had done. The morning following the rescue operation, the Mister awoke with a fierce determination burning in his chest. Willow was still asleep in the bed next to him, exhausted by the events of the previous night, but he had spent his few hours of sleep tormented by dreams where chained children mingled with visions of his company being systematically robbed. His phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was his partner. "Where are you?" The voice sounded worried, but the Mister could now detect the falsehood behind the performance. "You missed yesterday's meeting and didn't show up at the office." "I've been taking care of some personal matters," the Mister replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Personal matters? You know we have those Japanese investors arriving today, right? The ones who are going to inject capital into our new projects?" The Mister frowned. He didn't remember any Japanese investors, but in recent months he had signed so many documents without reading them properly that it was possible he had forgotten. "What time is the meeting?" 10 in the morning, and this time please don't be late. There's a lot of money at stake." After ending the call, the Mister gently woke Willow. She opened her big eyes and for a moment seemed lost, as if she didn't remember where she was. "Good morning, my girl," he said softly. "Daddy?" She sat up in bed, reality gradually returning. "Are the children safe?" "Everyone is safe. You were very brave yesterday." "And now, what will happen to them?" "Experts will take care of them. They will help them recover and find families who love them." He sat on the edge of the bed. "But first, I need to solve some problems with my company." Willow studied his face with that sharp awareness she had developed to survive. "The bad man from your job?" "Exactly. And I need you to stay in a safe place while I take care of it. I don't want to be away from you." "Only for a few hours. There is a very kind lady who will stay with you. She takes care of other children who have been through difficult situations." An hour later, the Mister left Willow in the care of a social worker specializing in childhood trauma in a safe house in the suburbs. She clung to him when it was time to leave. "You'll come back, won't you?" "I will always come back to you," he promised, kissing her forehead. "That's a promise." Driving to his company's office, the Mister felt like he was going into battle. The documents seized in the operation the night before had revealed the extent of the betrayal. His partner was not only poisoning him, but had created a complex network of shell corporations that diverted millions of dollars from his legitimate projects. The construction company's building stood majestically in the city's financial center, a symbol of decades of hard work and smart investments. But now, looking at it, the Mister saw only a facade that hid corruption and crime. He arrived at the office 15 minutes before the supposed meeting with the Japanese investors. His assistant, a trusted woman who had worked for him for over 10 years, seemed relieved to see him. "Sir, I'm glad you arrived. Your partner was getting nervous. He said it was crucial that you be present for the meeting." "What meeting is this anyway?" he asked, testing his suspicions. "With the investors from Japan, about the new residential towers project." She seemed confused. "Don't you remember? You signed the preliminary contracts last week." Once again, documents that he supposedly had signed but did not remember. The pattern was becoming too clear to ignore. "Where are these contracts?" "With your partner. He said he needed to review the details before the meeting." The Mister headed to his partner's office, but stopped before opening the door when he heard voices from inside. A conversation was happening in a low tone, but he managed to pick up fragments. "Udrain more resistant than we expected. Operation was discovered last night. Needs to sign the documents today or we lose everything." He retreated silently and returned to his own office, where he called the detective who had coordinated the investigation. "I need you to come to my office immediately," he whispered on the phone, "and bring recording devices." "Something happened?" "My partner is here, probably trying to finalize the theft of my company. If we can record him confessing." "Arriving in 10 minutes." While he waited, the Mister pretended to review papers, but in fact he was watching the movements in the office. He noticed that several employees seemed nervous, whispering to each other. Some avoided his gaze, others greeted him with forced cordiality. How many people in his own company knew about the conspiracy? The detective arrived disguised as a courier, delivering a package that contained tiny microphones. In a few minutes, the Mister's office was equipped to record any conversation. "Remember," the detective instructed before leaving, "keep him talking. The more he confesses, the better our evidence will be." At 10 o'clock sharp, the partner knocked on the office door. He entered with his usual smile, but the Mister could now see the tension behind the mask. "Ready for the most important meeting of our partnership?" the partner asked, sitting casually in the armchair in front of the desk. "About these Japanese investors. Refresh my memory on the details." The partner hesitated for a split second. "You've been very distracted lately. Maybe you should consider slowing down your pace of work. Or maybe I should stop taking those vitamins you recommended me." The change in the partner's expression was subtle, but the Mister caught it. "The vitamins, they are for your health. You've seemed very stressed." "Stressed with what?" "With business, of course. The pressures of maintaining a company of this size, the risky investments you've been making." The partner leaned forward. "In fact, I've been worried about some of your recent decisions." "What decisions?" "The funds you authorized for those speculative projects, the transfers to offshore accounts. Do you remember signing those authorizations?" The Mister kept a neutral expression, although internally his anger was boiling. "Maybe you can show me those documents." Sure. The partner opened his briefcase and spread papers on the table. "See here, your signature authorizing the transfer of 15 million to an account in the Cayman Islands. And here, approving a loan of 20 million, using the company as collateral." Examining the documents, the Mister recognized his own signature, but the dates corresponded to periods when he had been particularly confused due to the poisoning. "These amounts are very high," he commented, watching the partner's reaction. "They were your own decisions. I tried to advise you against some of these investments, but you insisted." The partner assumed an expression of false concern. "To be honest, I've been questioning whether you're in a position to continue making such important decisions." "What are you suggesting?" "Maybe it's time to consider a reorganization of the company. I could take on more executive responsibilities while you focus on personal matters." "Personal matters like that street kid you used to distract me?" The partner froze completely. For a few seconds, the mask of friendly concern disappeared completely, revealing something much colder and more calculating. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. The girl you instructed that woman to use as bait. Part of your plan to keep me distracted while you looted my company." "You're delirious," the partner said, but his voice had lost all conviction. "Maybe you should seek medical help. Or maybe you should explain why there were documents from our company in the basement of that building where children were being held as slaves." The color disappeared completely from the partner's face. He rose abruptly from his chair. "I don't know what building you're talking about." "Don't know? Then how do you explain that transfers from our company were used to finance a human trafficking operation?" The partner walked nervously to the window, his hands trembling visibly. When he turned back, his expression had changed completely. There was no more pretense of friendship or concern. "You don't understand the complexity of modern business," he said, his voice now cold and cynical. "Sometimes it is necessary to diversify investments, diversify into child trafficking, into operations that generate substantial profits. You have always been too sentimental to understand that money has no morality." "So you admit it?" The partner stopped walking, realizing he had said too much. "Admit what?" "That you use my company to finance crimes, that you systematically poisoned me to take control of my business, that you participated in a network that tortured innocent children." "Prove it!" the partner challenged, his arrogance returning. "You have no evidence of anything." It was then that the office door opened and the detective entered, followed by two federal agents. "Actually," said the detective. "We have evidence of everything, including a complete recording of this conversation." The partner looked around the office, finally noticing the small recording devices that had captured every word of his confession. "You tricked me," he said, his voice loaded with impotent fury. "No," replied the mister, rising from his chair. "I just learned from the best survival teacher I've ever known. A 4-year-old girl who taught me that sometimes you need to be smarter than the predators to protect the innocent." As his former partner was led away in handcuffs, the mister looked out the window of his office and smiled for the first time in months. In a few hours, he would be back in the arms of that brave little girl who had changed his life forever. 3 weeks had passed since the arrest of the treacherous partner, but the mister discovered that exposing the conspiracy was only the beginning of a much more complex journey. His company was in chaos, with federal auditors sifting through every transaction of the last 2 years, nervous investors questioning the stability of his ventures, and the media speculating about the future of his business empire. Sitting in his temporary office, the main one had been sealed off as evidence, he reviewed financial reports that showed the true damage caused by the betrayal. More than $50 million had been diverted through a complex network of shell corporations. His investments in gold and cryptocurrencies had been compromised, and several of his real estate projects were stalled by legal investigations. But none of that mattered as much as the small figure sitting on his office sofa, coloring drawings with a concentration that made his heart clench with tenderness. Willow had adapted to her new life with a resilience that constantly surprised him. In the 3 weeks since the rescue, she had gained weight, her hair glowed with health, and most importantly, she had begun to smile with genuine frequency. But there were still moments when she woke up screaming in the middle of the night, or cringed when she heard loud voices. "Daddy," she said, looking up from her drawing, "why do those people in the newspaper write bad things about you?" He sighed. The press had discovered Willow's story, and naturally, some outlets were questioning the motives of a single millionaire adopting a street child in the midst of a corporate scandal. "Sometimes people don't understand when someone does something good," he explained, setting aside the papers to focus on her. "They think there must be selfish motives. But you saved me because you're good. I know that." "How do you know?" "Because when you look at me, your eyes get bright, like the eyes of the woman who sang to me in my dreams." The mention of the dreams made the mister pause. In recent weeks, she had spoken more and more about fragments of memories from her life before the stepmother. A woman who sang, a place with flowers, the feeling of safety that she had lost very young. "Would you like to try to find that woman from your dreams?" he asked gently. She considered the question seriously. What if she doesn't want me anymore? What if she forgot me? Impossible to forget someone special like you. At that moment, his assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, there's a lady here who says she has important information about Willow. She seems very nervous." The mister looked at Willow, who had shrunk back slightly upon hearing about a mysterious visitor. "Send her in, but slowly, and ask the detective to stay close by, just for safety." The woman who entered the office made Willow freeze completely. It was the stepmother, but an unrecognizable version of her. She had lost weight, her hair was styled, and there was no trace of the alcoholism that had once dominated her appearance. More importantly, her eyes showed something she had never shown before: genuine regret. "I didn't come to take her away," she said immediately, noticing how Willow had hidden behind the mister. "I came to tell the truth." "What truth?" asked the businessman, keeping himself protectively between the two. "About who she really is. About why they forced me to keep her." The stepmother looked directly at Willow. "Little one, do you remember a house with a garden full of white roses?" The child's eyes widened. "How do you know about the roses?" "Because I took you from there when you were 2 years old." The silence that followed was charged with unspoken revelations. The mister felt as if the ground had moved beneath his feet. "Explain!" he ordered. The stepmother sat heavily in a chair, as if the weight of the truth were physical. 3 years ago, men appeared at my house. They said they knew about my gambling debts, about the money I'd skimmed from my old job. They gave me a choice, prison or do them a favor. What favor? Take care of a child, keep her alive but broken, vulnerable. They said eventually she'd be useful for some bigger plan. Willow stepped out from behind the mister, her curiosity outweighing her fear. Did you steal my family? Yes, the stepmother admitted, tears streaming down her face. And I've lived with that guilt every day since. That's why I drank, why I was so cruel to you. I hated what I'd become. Where's my real family? Willow asked, her voice small but firm. Your mum. Your mum has been looking for you desperately for 3 years. She never stopped believing you were alive. The mister's heart raced. Where is she? In a small town about 2 hours from here. She doesn't know I've found you. The stepmother looked directly at Willow. She still sings that song you always hummed when you thought I wasn't listening. The song from the woman in my dreams, Willow whispered. They're not dreams, Willow. They're memories. What followed was one of the most emotionally intense hours of the mister's life. Through tears and broken confessions, the stepmother revealed that Willow had been kidnapped during a home invasion. Her kidnappers had told her mom that Willow was in danger and would only be safe if she never tried to look for her. Why are you telling us this now? The mister asked. Because when I heard that you'd saved all those children, I realized there was finally a chance to do something right. The stepmother looked at Willow with a mixture of love and remorse. And because this child deserves to be with those who truly love her. Willow cautiously approached the stepmother. You hurt me, but you also protected me sometimes. Why? Because even though I was forced to do terrible things, I could never stop seeing you as the precious child you are. The woman reached out a trembling hand. Can you forgive me? Willow studied the face of the woman who had been both her tormentor and protector. Then, with the emotional wisdom that only children who have suffered greatly possess, she took the outstretched hand. I forgive you. But now you need to tell us where my mom is. The mister watched this interaction with a mixture of pride and growing dread. Pride in the extraordinary compassion of his adopted daughter. Dread at the possibility of losing her to her biological family. 2 hours later, a small caravan of vehicles was heading down the highway towards the town where, supposedly, Willow's biological mother had spent 3 years desperately searching for her lost child. Willow was sitting next to the mister, watching the scenery pass by the window. Daddy, will you visit me when I go back to my mom? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. Do you want to go back to her? I want to meet her, but I don't want to lose you. She looked at him with those big, serious eyes. Is it possible to have 2 families? I don't know, Willow, but we'll figure it out together. As they approached their destination, the mister mentally prepared himself for what might be the last day with the child who had transformed his life. He'd spent billions on investments over the years, but he'd never made an emotional wager as high as this one. The small town that emerged on the horizon looked like it had been plucked from a storybook. Colorful houses, flower-filled gardens, a central square with an old fountain. It was the kind of place where kids still played freely in the streets, where everyone knew everyone. It's very pretty, Willow commented, pressing her nose against the window. It is, he agreed, though his attention was focused on a specific house that was coming into view, a small, well-kept house surrounded by a garden where white roses bloomed profusely. Even from a distance he could see a woman kneeling among the flowers, tending the garden with obsessive care. When their vehicles pulled up in front of the house, she raised her head. The cry she let out when she saw Willow getting out of the car echoed through the quiet street, a sound of recognition, relief, and 3 years of pent-up grief being released all at once. My baby! My little one! Willow ran towards the woman, and as they embraced in the middle of the rose garden, the mister knew he was witnessing something sacred. the moment when a mother reclaimed the child she thought she had lost forever. But he also knew that his own life would never be the same. The embrace between mother and daughter in the rose garden seemed to last an eternity, but for the mister, watching from a distance, it was both too long and too short. Too long because every second increased his certainty that he would lose the child who had become the center of his life. Too short because he knew that this moment marked the end of an era in his existence. Willow's biological mother was a woman in her early 30s, with brown hair identical to her daughter's and the same expressive eye shape. Her simple clothes and calloused hands betrayed a life of hard work, likely spent searching for her lost daughter while trying to survive the pain of loss. "I knew you'd come back," she murmured, covering Willow's small face with kisses. "Every night I looked at the stars and promised I'd wait as long as it took." Willow, initially shy in the embrace of the stranger who was her mum, gradually relaxed when the woman began to hum softly, the same melody she sang in moments of deepest sadness during her life with the stepmother. "I remember this song," Willow whispered, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "I always dreamed about it, because I sang it to you every night when you were a baby. It was our special song." The mister approached slowly, reluctant to interrupt the reunion, but knowing he needed to talk to the woman. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "You're the man who saved my daughter," she said, without releasing Willow but extending a hand to him. "I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks necessary. She saved me too." The woman studied his face carefully. "You love her as if she were your own child." "I do. There was no point in lying. She's become my family, and you've become her daddy," Willow added, looking between the two adults with a worried expression. "Please, don't fight because of me." The simplicity of Willow's concern touched both adults deeply. The biological mother stood up, still holding her daughter in her arms, and faced the mister directly. "Tell me how you two met. Tell me everything." Over the next 2 hours, sitting in the small living room of the modest house, the mister recounted the entire story. How he had found Willow in the vacant lot, the months of gradually shocking discoveries, the conspiracy that nearly destroyed his company, and above all, how this small, courageous child had become the most important thing in his life. The mother listened in silence, occasionally asking questions or exchanging meaningful glances with Willow, who confirmed details of the narrative with serious nods. "She suffered so much," the woman said finally, her words laden with pain. "Because of me." "It wasn't your fault," the mister protested. "You were a victim too. But I should have protected her better. I should have been more careful." She hugged Willow tighter. 3 years lost. 3 years in which she was starved, beaten, used by terrible people. "But now it's over," Willow said, wiping away her mother's tears with her small hands. "And I've learned a lot of important things." "What have you learned?" "That there are good people in the world, like Daddy, that sometimes you have to be brave to save other people, and that families can be different from what we think." The depth of the observation left both adults silent. This child had been forged by experiences that no child should have, but instead of breaking her, they had made her extraordinarily wise and compassionate. "There's something I need to tell you," the mother said hesitantly. "Something I discovered during these 3 years searching for her." "What is it?" "The men who took her. They didn't act alone. There was someone financing the operation, someone with a lot of money who wanted specific children for specific purposes." The mister felt a chill run down his spine. "Do you know who it was?" "Not the name, but I know he was interested specifically in smart, resilient children, children who could survive trauma and still maintain their humanity." She looked at Willow with a mixture of pride and dread. "Our little one was chosen because she demonstrated those qualities from a very young age." "Chosen for what?" "To be trained, shaped, transformed into someone who could infiltrate wealthy families, gain trust, obtain information." The mother paused, looking directly at the mister. "You were her ultimate target from the beginning." The revelation hit the mister like a lightning bolt. Everything had been planned even more carefully than he had imagined. Not only had his company been targeted, he personally had been studied, his vulnerabilities mapped, and an innocent child had been turned into the perfect weapon against him. "But their plan failed," Willow said, with a wisdom that defied her age. "Because when you saved me from those crows, I forgot everything the stepmother had taught me about pretending. I just wanted to help because you looked sad. And it was that moment of genuine compassion that destroyed a plan that had taken years to construct," the mother murmured. "My daughter saved you by being herself, not by being what they wanted her to be." That night, the mister stayed in a local inn, while mother and daughter spent their first night together in 3 years. He couldn't sleep, tormented by thoughts about the future. He had enough resources to give Willow anything she wanted: elite education, world travel, all the comforts that his wealth could buy. But could he compete with the love of a mother who had spent 3 years desperately searching for her daughter? The next morning, he found mother and daughter having breakfast in the garden, surrounded by the white roses that Willow had mentioned in her fragmented dreams. The scene was so perfect, so natural, that he almost turned back to the inn without interrupting. "Daddy!" Willow saw him first and ran to hug him. "Mom made pancakes. Do you want to try some?" The word "mom" sounded strange coming from her. During all the weeks they had spent together, she had only used that term in reference to the woman from her lost dreams. Now that woman was real, she was here, and naturally reclaiming her role in Willow's life. "Sit with us," the mother said gently. "We need to talk about the future." During breakfast, she explained her situation. She worked as a seamstress in a local factory, earning enough to survive, but not much more. She had lived alone since Willow's kidnapping, dedicating every free moment to searching for Willow. "I want her to have everything she deserves," the mother said, watching Willow play with a butterfly that had landed on the table. "Education, opportunities, security. But I don't know if I can give that to her." "I can," the mister said immediately. "I can give her all that and more." "I know, and I see how much she loves you." The woman paused, clearly struggling with a difficult decision. "She's told me about the last few months with you, how you've taken care of her, protected her, made her feel safe for the first time since she was taken from me. Where does this lead us? To a question I never thought I'd have to ask. Would it be possible to share her?" Willow, who had been listening to the conversation while playing, approached the two adults. "You're talking about me as if I wasn't here." "Sorry, honey," the mother said. "What do you want?" "I want to stay with both of you," she replied without hesitation. "I want to get to know my real mom and have time with her every day, but I also want to stay with my daddy because he taught me that there are good people in the world." "That would be complicated," the mister said. "Why complicated?" Willow asked. "Rich people like you can buy big houses, can't they?" The innocent observation planted a seed of possibility in the mister's mind. His fortune had been built on decades of smart investments and hard work. His assets included properties in several states, shares in multinational companies, reserves in gold and foreign currency. Why not use these resources to create something that had never existed before, a family that was unconventional but deeply loving? "You'd have to leave your life here," he said to Willow's mother, "your job, your house, everything you know, to be with my daughter. To ensure she has all the opportunities she deserves." The woman smiled for the first time since they had met. "It's not even a difficult decision." It was then that Willow did something that neither of the adults expected. She took both of their hands and joined them on the table. "Now we're a family," she announced, with the seriousness of someone who had just solved the most complex problem in the world. "And families take care of each other." Looking at that extraordinary child who had survived unimaginable horrors and still maintained her capacity to love unconditionally, the mister knew that his life was about to change once again. But this time, the change would bring not destruction, but the construction of something he had never imagined to be possible, a true family. 6 months later, life had settled into a rhythm that the Mister had never imagined possible. The large mansion in the exclusive suburbs of the city had been transformed into a real home, where children's laughter echoed through the halls that had once known only silence and solitude. Willow's biological mother had adapted to her new life with a grace that constantly surprised him. Away from the daily struggle for survival, she had blossomed, revealing a natural intelligence and a dignity that made it easy to understand where Willow had inherited her inner strength. She now managed a foundation that he had created to help other children who were victims of trafficking, turning her own pain into purpose. "Daddy! Mom! Come see!" Willow shouted from somewhere in the backyard, her voice carrying the pure excitement that had become the soundtrack to their mornings. The Mister set aside the financial reports. His company had not only recovered from the scandal, but had thrived under his new leadership focused on social responsibility. He found Willow's mother in the kitchen, preparing lunch with a smile that had become constant in recent months. "What has our little inventor discovered now?" he asked, putting his arm around her waist in a gesture that had become natural. "I don't know, but from the shouts of joy, it must be something special." They went out together to the garden, where they found Willow kneeling beside a flower bed that she had planted with the help of the gardener. Her small hands were gently holding a butterfly that had landed on one of the white roses, the same ones that now grew throughout the garden, a constant reminder of the journey that had brought them together. "She's not afraid of me," Willow announced in amazement. "Normally they fly away when someone gets close, but this one stayed." The Mister knelt beside her, watching the orange and black butterfly that remained serenely on the rose. "Maybe she knows you have a kind heart, or maybe she knows I'm happy," Willow said, looking at the two adults she had brought together into an unlikely family. "Animals can sense when people are happy, can't they?" "They can," confirmed the mother, sitting down on the grass next to Willow, "and you've been very happy lately." "Because now I have everything I've always wanted," Willow said simply. "A family that loves me. A house where I can draw on the walls if I want, and people who listen when I talk." The mention of drawing on the walls made the Mister smile. In the early days in the new house, Willow had timidly asked permission to draw, expecting to be punished as she had been so many times in the past. Her expression of astonishment when he not only allowed it, but dedicated an entire wall of her room to her art, had been one of the most touching moments of his life. "And there's one more thing," Willow continued, her expression turning serious. "Now I can help other children like you helped me." This was the most extraordinary part of Willow's transformation. As she gained weight and security, instead of forgetting her difficult past, she had developed a passion for helping other children in similar situations. Twice a week, always accompanied by one of her parents, she visited shelters and support homes, bringing toys and, above all, her own story of hope. "Speaking of which," the Mister said, "I have a surprise for you." "What kind of surprise?" Willow's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Remember that boy who was your friend on the streets? The one you saw in the photograph in that terrible building?" Willow's expression changed immediately, mixing hope and fear. "Did you find him?" "We did. And he's safe." What followed was an explosion of joy that echoed throughout the garden. Willow jumped into the Mister's arms, then into her mother's, then ran in circles through the grass, laughing and crying at the same time. "Where is he? Can I see him? Is he okay? Does he remember me?" "He's in a recovery home about an hour from here," the mother explained. "The doctors said he's been through some very difficult times, but he's recovering. And yes, he remembers you. In fact, talking about you has been part of his therapy. Can we visit him now?" "We can," the Mister said. "In fact, there's something else we want to talk to you about him." The trip to the recovery home was filled with Willow's anxious chatter, who asked one question after another about her friend's condition. The mister and the mother exchanged meaningful glances, both nervous about the proposal they planned to make. The recovery home was a quiet place, surrounded by manicured gardens, and designed specifically to help traumatized children reintegrate into normal life. When they arrived, they were greeted by the director, a gentlewoman who had become an expert in cases of child trafficking. "He's been eager to see you since he heard you were coming," the director said as she led them through colorful corridors decorated with children's art. "Your friendship on the streets was one of the few positive memories he can clearly access." The meeting took place in a large, brightly lit playroom. The boy was sitting at a small table, drawing with crayons. When he saw Willow enter, his face lit up with a smile that erased months of suffering. "You're okay," he exclaimed, standing up to hug her. "I thought they'd hurt you too." "I'm okay, and you're going to be okay too," she said, hugging him tightly. "This is my daddy and my mom. They're very good people." The boy studied the two adults with the caution of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "They won't hurt you." "Never," she said with absolute conviction. "They saved me, and now they want to save you too." It was then that the mister knelt down to the boy's height. "How would you like to have a family? A home where you're safe and loved?" "Really?" The question came out in a hopeful whisper. "Really," confirmed the mother. "If you want, you can come live with us. You and Willow can be real siblings." What followed was an explosion of joy even greater than the one in the garden. The two children hugged, jumped, laughed, and cried, celebrating a future that only weeks before had seemed impossible. "Will we have our own room?" asked the boy. "Separate rooms, but in the same house," the mister explained. "And a big garden where you can play. And toys? All the toys you want. And food? All the food you can eat. And no one will hit us." "Never," the mother promised with tears in her eyes. "You'll never be hurt again." 2 weeks later, the adoption process was underway, and the big mansion had gained another resident. The boy adapted with the same remarkable resilience that Willow had shown, and soon the two were creating elaborate adventures in the gardens and filling the house with their laughter. But the real transformation had taken place in the adults. The mister discovered that his fortune, his investments in stocks and properties, all his accumulated wealth, only had true value when used to create happiness for those he loved. Willow's mother had found not only her lost daughter but a greater purpose in her life. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one night as they watched the two children playing in the garden under the stars. "Regret what?" "Your life having changed so completely, having lost your freedom, your peace." The mister pulled her closer, thinking about the question. His life had truly changed completely. There was no more silence in his house. There was no more solitude. There was no more the simplicity of making decisions, thinking only of himself. "You know what I discovered?" he said finally. "Freedom without love is just a gilded cage, and tranquility without purpose is just emptiness." Just then, the two children ran up to them, breathless from playing. "Can we camp out in the backyard tonight?" Willow asked. "With marshmallows," the boy added. "And ghost stories," she finished. The two adults exchanged glances and smiled. "Why not?" the mother said. And as they assembled a makeshift tent in the garden perfumed by the white roses, the mister knew he had finally made the most valuable investment of his life. He had invested in love, in family, in giving wounded children a chance to simply be children again. But there was still one last surprise waiting for them, a revelation that would connect all the loose threads of their extraordinary journey. A year later, on a sunny spring day, the mister was in his office reviewing the latest reports from the foundation he had created to combat child trafficking. The numbers were impressive. Over 200 children had been rescued, 15 criminal networks dismantled, and their operations were expanding to other countries. But for him, the most important statistics were much simpler. Two children laughing in the garden of his home every morning. "Daddy!" Willow's familiar voice echoed through the hallway. Now 5 years old, she had grown and strengthened, but she maintained that extraordinary maturity that experience had given her. "Someone's here to see you." He frowned. He had no meeting scheduled for that morning. "Who is it?" "A very elegant lady. She said she knows you from a long time ago." Intrigued, the mister went down to the main living room, where he found a woman of approximately 60 years, well-dressed, with carefully styled grey hair. There was something familiar about her face, but he couldn't quite place it. "Sorry to bother you without warning," the woman said, standing up when she saw him. "My name is Clara, and I believe you met my daughter many years ago." "Your daughter?" "The woman who sang to your Willow when she was a baby," the visitor said, looking towards the garden where the two children were playing. "The biological mother of your adopted daughter." The world seemed to stop for a moment. The mister looked out the window, where the children's mother was watering the roses, completely oblivious to the conversation that was taking place inside the house. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "My daughter never told me the whole story," Clara explained, sitting down again. "Just said she had reunited with her own daughter through a generous man who had saved her. But when I saw your picture in the newspaper, in the report about your foundation against child trafficking, I recognized you immediately." "Recognized me from where?" "You're Roberto Silva's son, aren't you?" The shock hit the mister like a lightning bolt. Roberto Silva had been his father, a successful businessman who had died in an accident when he was only 17 years old. But he didn't understand the connection. "How did you know my father?" "I worked for him over 30 years ago. I was a secretary at the construction company he ran before you took over." Clara smiled melancholically. "Your father was a very good man. When he found out I was pregnant and the child's father had abandoned me, he helped me financially. He paid all the medical expenses, gave me paid leave, made sure I had everything I needed." The mister sat heavily in an armchair, trying to process the information. The children's mother is your daughter." "She is. And 30 years ago your father saved our family from misery. Now you saved my granddaughter from slavery." Clara wiped away a tear that was running down her face. "Fate has mysterious ways of connecting the right people. Why didn't you look for your daughter after she was kidnapped?" "Because I died," Clara said simply. "At least, that's what she's believed for all these years." The revelation became even more complex as Clara told her story. 3 years ago, she had been the victim of a serious car accident that left her in a coma for months. When she finally woke up, she discovered that her daughter had disappeared with her granddaughter, and all the people they knew had been informed that she had died in the accident. "It was part of the same plan," she explained. "The kidnappers wanted to eliminate any chance that anyone would look for the girl, so they spread the news that I had died, so that my daughter would feel completely alone in the world." "How did you find out the truth?" "It took years. When I finally managed to recover completely and started looking for them, I found only false leads and conflicting information. It was only when I saw the report about your foundation that I was able to track down where they were." At that moment, the children's mother entered the room, stopping abruptly when she saw the visitor. The face that had lit up upon seeing the mister paled instantly. "Mom?" she whispered, as if she were seeing a ghost. "My dear girl," Clara said, standing up with tears in her eyes, "I never died. I've been looking for you all these years." What followed was a reunion even more emotional than the one in the rose garden a year before. Mother and daughter embraced, as if trying to recover 3 lost years in a single moment, crying and laughing at the same time. The children, drawn by the sounds of crying and laughter, ran into the house. Willow stopped when she saw the scene, her sharp intuition immediately grasping the importance of the moment. "Mom, why are you crying?" "Because I'm happy, honey. This is my mom, your grandma." The child's eyes widened. "My grandma was lost too?" "She was, but now she's found us, just like you found me." The boy approached timidly. "Does this mean our family just got bigger?" Clara knelt down to be at the height of the two children. "If you'll have me, yes. I've always wanted to have grandkids to spoil." Willow studied the older woman's face with the same seriousness with which she had studied all the important adults in her life. "Do you sing?" "I do," Clara replied, surprised by the question. "Then you can be part of our family. Families sing together." That night, for the first time in years, the large mansion was truly full. 4 generations were gathered around the dining table. Clara, her daughter, the 2 children, and the mister who had become the center that held them all together. During dinner, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Clara revealed that there were documents kept for decades, proving that the mister's father had created a special fund to help her daughter. Money that had never been used because everyone thought she was dead. "There's over $1 million waiting for you," Clara said to her daughter. "Your father always wanted you to have financial security." "I don't need money," the woman replied, looking around the table. "I already have everything I've ever wanted." "Then use it for the foundation," suggested the mister, "to help more children like ours." "Our foundation," Willow corrected. "Because we're a family, and families work together." Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep and Clara was settled in the guest room, the mister and the children's mother sat on the porch, watching the stars. "Can you believe how our stories connected?" she asked, snuggling into his arms. "Sometimes I think it was all planned from the beginning," he replied. "Not by people, but by fate. As if the universe wanted to correct some old injustices. And do you regret anything?" The mister thought about the question she asked regularly, always seeking reassurance that he had truly chosen this life. He thought about his previous existence, the elegant loneliness, the silence of the empty mansion, the simplicity of living only for himself. "You know what I discovered?" he said finally. "For years, I accumulated money, investments, properties, thinking I was building an empire, but in reality, I was just gathering tools. Tools for what? To build this." He gestured towards the house, where 2 children slept safe, and a recovered grandmother rested finally in peace. A true family, a home filled with love, a purpose that goes beyond profits and dividends. The next morning, Willow woke up earlier than everyone else and went to the garden, where she found a butterfly perched on the white roses. But this time, instead of just watching it, she whispered a little prayer of gratitude. "Thank you for helping me find my family," she said to the butterfly, "and for making my daddy stop being sad." The butterfly remained still for a few moments, as if it were really listening, before flying towards the rising sun. When the mister came down for breakfast, he found his whole family already gathered in the kitchen. Clara preparing pancakes while telling stories of her daughter's childhood, the children's mother helping and laughing at the memories, the boy sitting at the table drawing, and Willow arranging flowers in a jar. "Good morning, family," he said, and for the first time in his life, the word family carried all the weight and all the joy that it always should have carried. "Good morning, Daddy," the 2 children replied in chorus. And in that moment, looking around the kitchen full of life and love, the mister knew that he had finally found the most valuable investment of his life. He had invested in people who transformed his house into a home, his loneliness into a family, and his existence into a life that was truly worth living. The girl he had found dying in a vacant lot, surrounded by crows, had become the little light that illuminated his entire world. And now, surrounded by a family that grew with each discovery, she finally had everything a child deserves: unconditional love, absolute security, and the certainty that she would never be alone again. Sometimes guardian angels really do appear in the most unexpected places, disguised as brave little children with hearts bigger than the world. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.